Good afternoon. You know how when someone starts a self-improvement program, they're often encouraged to have a buddy to help them and keep them motivated. Let me give you an example. If you want to go to the gym more often, many articles will advise you to enlist a friend as a gym buddy, someone who'll work out with you and make it fun. Or if you're learning a new language, you're encouraged to have a language buddy, someone who speaks that target language and can help you practice the things that you're learning. Well, over the past 6 years, I've inadvertently started a self-improvement regimen for myself. And I have 2 buddies who are helping me through it at the moment. And the coolest thing is, I made them myself. Yes, my wife had a major role to play in it, as did divine intervention, because the self-improvement program I'm talking about is what many of us would simply refer to as parenthood. I am the parent of 2 small children, a boy and a girl. Over these past 6 years, parenthood has taught me several small and big lessons that I want to share with you today. And I have to say that it has improved me, although not always with my willingness, and has made me a better person, or so I believe. But before I get down to that, I need to make a few clear disclaimers. The first thing is that what I'm going to say is based solely on my own personal experience. I don't claim to be an expert when it comes to being a parent. I don't even want to refer to us, my wife and I, in the plural, because these are very much my own personal reflections on something that we've gone through together as a team over the past few years. Before I go to the second important disclaimer, I want to show of hands. How many people in the room are parents? Now, there are cameras, so if you have children that you don't want anyone to know about, please don't raise your hand. Okay, so I was afraid of this. We are a minority. And why this is important is because in our global society today, we are revisiting this concept of family, or the traditional belief that you have to be a parent at some point in your life. It's a cornerstone of your life experience. I believe in a diversity of life philosophies. So my talk today is purely about my own lessons as a parent. I'm not here to advocate parenthood as a necessity for everyone in the room. I'm not here to say, let's go forth and multiply. The final disclaimer of the day, if you ask any parent to talk about their children, they can go on and on for hours. I'm no different. I love talking about my kids, but today is not going to be about that. I'm going to try and keep the stories and anecdotes about how cute and smart my children are to a minimum and talk about simple facts and small events. So now that we're done with the disclaimers, let's get right down into it. 6 years ago, I was a different person, and all that changed irreversibly one late night in December when my first child was born. And the first lesson that parenthood has taught me is to be more flexible. I used to be the kind of guy who would plan everything. I'd plan my day down to a margin of a few minutes. I'd plan evening activities, weekends, holidays, everything. But when you have 2 small children, a new randomness comes into the equation that is very difficult to approximate. Let me give you a small example. My son started school a couple of months ago. And we found out that we had to leave the house at 8:15 every morning in order to be at school on time. So I figured, okay, we'll wake up at 7:30 in the morning, and 45 minutes should be enough for him to wash up, dress up, have breakfast, and in general, be ready to leave. But guess what? My son wanted to have playtime before going to school in the morning. Angry dad solution number 1, rush him through his morning routine so you can squeeze out a few minutes at the end for him to play before we leave. Angry dad solution number 2, say no. No playtime before school. You can play to your heart's content when you come back from class in the afternoon. Flexible dad solution. I started waking up my son 15 to 20 minutes earlier and let him go through his normal morning routine and get some time to play in the end. It worked for me, but it's not always that easy. In fact, I used to be the kind of guy who would get very angry and irritated if we were ever running late to get somewhere. I still do, to a certain extent. But I've learned that the classic saying is true. When something happens, in that situation, the only thing that is fully under your control is how you react to it. So now, when we're unavoidably being late to yet another event, and when you're the father of small children, you have so many opportunities to be late to school, late to karate, late to art group, late to theater, late to play dates, birthdays, and so on and so forth. Now, when we're unavoidably running late to be somewhere, I ask myself the question, how big is the negative impact going to be for us to be late to this birthday or play date? And usually the answer is it's not going to be very big. So I try to not let it affect my mood, and consequently not affect the fun that my family is going to have. It's not easy though. It doesn't always work for me, even to this day. The second important lesson, closely related to flexibility, is patience. I used to think that I was a very patient guy, but I had no idea. Children have this way of bringing you to your breaking point when it comes to patience, again and again and again. It's like they're running experiments to try to figure out what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And every time you get angry or irritated at something that they've done, you're providing them with valuable data that they're storing somewhere in those little brains of theirs. I swear it's like they're collating a table or drawing a graph in their minds, coming up with a schema that will somehow predict the behavior that will have the optimal fun to punishment ratio. And you'd never guess, they look so cute, they look so small, you'd never guess the complicated statistical analysis and mathematical prediction that is going on in those little brains. But it's true. And I've learned that patience is a bit like a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get at it. And remember the gym buddy analogy I use? Little children are more like gym coaches in this sense. The ones that want you to lift heavier weights, put your back into it, let's try something harder, come on, can you do it, will this break you? When it comes to testing patience, that's what they are. They're not gym buddies, they're gym coaches. But I've learned that humor is a good sidekick for patience to have. So sometimes when we're on long road trips and my son keeps asking, are we there yet, are we there yet, are we there yet? The best strategy I have is to preempt him with a humorous response or to deliberately mishear what he's saying. Are we fair yet? Do we care yet? Trust me, driving kids a little bit crazy like this once in a while can be a lot of fun. The next interesting experience I've had as a parent came a few months ago and taught me about how our children interact with their environments and with their surroundings and how they're influenced by them, sometimes without even us noticing. My son graduated from kindergarten, and we decided to prepare a short video featuring all the children in his group who were going to go to school after the summer. And in this video, we asked all these children the one question that occurs and recurs in every childhood. We asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I noticed something slightly disturbing. The boys said things like, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman, I want to be president. One girl said, I want to be a fairy. Another girl said, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. Another girl said, I want to be a mom. The worst part is, I would not have noticed this difference if I were not also the father of a young girl. So I caught myself asking the question, what if a few years later, my daughter graduates from kindergarten and has this preset notion in her mind that she can't be in the police or she can't be president, not considering those options. And let's be clear, I don't blame the kindergarten at all. These are small messages that our children get from society. They see things, they hear things, and that's what leads to these stereotypes in their minds. And I've realized that as the father of both a boy and a girl, I need to do a better job of compensating for some of these information gaps in society about gender roles. But even for those of us who are parents of only boys, we need to realize that there are stereotypes out there that harm the well-being of our male children. For example, I always personally cringe when someone comes up to my 5-year-old boy and says, why are you crying? Are you a girl? No, he's a boy. But anatomically and physiologically, boys and girls have all the same glands and ducts that you need to cry. They're built the same way for that particular function. No matter how many times you tell your male children that they're not supposed to cry in society, the reality is that sometimes they really need to. So if you want to encourage them to be open about their feelings, You have to make it count. In fact, I can't let this opportunity go by without doing just that. I'm going to look straight into the camera for just a second. This is a special message to you, Mikhail. If you really, really want to cry and people tell you you're not supposed to, don't listen to them. If you feel like crying, you can cry. He's a bit too young to be here with us today, but who knows? He might watch this as a video a few years from now, so why miss the chance? Coming to the next point, which is closely related to anatomy and physiology, my original educational background is medicine. I graduated from this very university more than 10 years ago. Viewed from that lens, parenthood has been a fascinating experience because you get to see a whole new person take shape before your very eyes. Someone who goes from da 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 to saying a few words to saying complete sentences, from crawling to walking to running to jumping. This transformation fills me as a parent with the appreciation for the wonders of nature and a sense of overarching gratitude that makes small everyday problems seem like insignificant specks of dust on a wonderful painting by a masterful artist. And with this appreciation comes an understanding of other things as well. I'm sure all of us in this room love our parents to a certain extent, but not all of us can fully comprehend what they have been through as human beings if we haven't experienced parenthood ourselves. A few small examples from everyday life. I never knew how exhausting it could be to have a newborn child that cries several times in the night and wakes you up, until I had to go through that with my wife, with our newborn children. I never knew how difficult it would be when you have a small child and you send him to a summer camp away from home for a few nights. And every evening you have this temptation to call and see how he's doing, but you resist that urge because that's what's good for the child as well. These are difficult things that our parents have been through. And because today is also my dad's birthday, I want to use the opportunity and say thank you to my parents and happy birthday to my father. The next small lesson I've learned from parenthood is linked to this controversial idea we have today, this conspiracy theory that we're constantly being watched. They say, tape up your laptop cameras. Big business has access to your living room through your smart television. Be careful what you say on the phone. The government is listening to your conversation. None of these agencies has anything when it comes to the observation and listening skills of little children. They watch you all the time. They pick up little habits from you that you didn't even know you had. They see you doing something they're not supposed to do, and they use it against you in a skillful move that would have the most masterful of chess players holding their heads in defeat. So I've learned that watching myself, observing myself from the side like my children do, can be helpful to improve in small ways. Like, for example, when I see my son's toys untidily lying on the floor, I'm sometimes visually reminded of my own work desk and what it looks like from time to time. So it's no wonder that tidiness is not a big priority for my son. Next lesson. Before I was married, I used to be subscribed to various newsletters, and one of them would send me a random interesting fact every day. Something like, did you know that movie trailers used to be played after the main feature in a cinema? That's why they're called trailers. They weren't played before like they are today. Now, let me stop this talk for a second. For those of you who did not raise your hands about being parents and who don't care about parenthood insights and lessons learned, I do acknowledge that this is going to be your main takeaway from this talk. Movie trailers used to be played after the main feature in a cinema, not before. But back to parenthood. It's like being subscribed to this newsletter when you have small children, but you only get the questions, you don't get the answers. You have to get the answers yourself. Small children constantly ask questions about all sorts of random things. And we're lucky today, we have the internet, we can quickly search for the answers and come up with something that would satisfy them. But I've also been fascinated by how these questions develop in my children's minds. And I've learned some very interesting things. Apparently, research has shown that when a small child asks a question at home and gets a reply, it encourages him or her to ask more questions. It builds up that sense of curiosity. And researchers have found that when children go to school, those from the so-called curious households, where they've asked questions and received replies, have more knowledge than those who come from average households. But that's not all. They also have a greater love for learning. So researchers have called this a sort of rich getting richer phenomenon. They come to school with more knowledge, and they also gain more knowledge more quickly than their peers because they love to learn more. So if you have children, or when you have children, when they start asking you all sorts of random things, be patient and try to answer as much as you can. The final lesson about parenthood that I want to share with you today is that in reality I don't know anything about parenthood. Each stage of development brings new information and new experience. Each child is different than the previous one. So I'm only just starting. 6 years is really nothing. But this feeling of having someone out there whom you love unconditionally in the truest sense of the word, whom you love more than you could ever really love yourself, is very, very powerful and very, very inspiring. Long story short, being a parent has made me a better person. Being a parent is like having a job where you have a very, very demanding boss, or several very demanding bosses, and constant on-the-job training. But the retirement package of that job is amazing. I can't wait to see the kinds of adults my children are going to become someday. And then, maybe, I'll start a new job. I'll be a grandparent. Thank you.